Some choices are hard, like should you choose McDonald's Buttermilk Crispy Tenders or the Buttermilk Crispy Chicken in our signature crafted recipe sandwiches? Well, guess what? You can't make a wrong choice. It's Buttermilk Love, and that's good news. Speaking of good news, now you can get McDonald's 2-piece Buttermilk Crispy Tenders for just $2 from their $1, $2, $3 menu. Cannot be combined with other offer or combo meal. Prices and participation may vary.
Welcome, everyone, to the Supernatural Substation. Today is Friday, April 13th of 2018. Friday the 13th, people. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. I'm Bernadine LeBlanc, your host for tonight. Our good friend and host, Eileen Pistanio, is recuperating from surgery. We are praying for her a speedy recovery. Our guest tonight will be joining us shortly. Her name is Josie Varga, author of Visits from Heaven. She's a motivational speaker and an afterlife expert. Co-hosting with me tonight is our good friend Peter Haviland. He's a parapsychologist, clinical hypnotherapist, author, and private investigator, also the founder of Lone Star Spirits Paranormal Investigations. Hello, Pete. How are you doing tonight on this Friday the 13th?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good so far. There's a lot of superstition going on around the Friday the 13th thing, so I pulled up an article for us to give our listeners a little taste of the superstition and the why Friday the 13th is considered to be bad luck.
Ah, okay.
Have you ever had bad luck on Friday the 13th?
No, honestly, no, not really. I've had things happen, all the time. So I mean, just because it's Friday the 13th doesn't mean that's a bad day.
I know.
But everybody's,
right?
People have different superstitions and different beliefs, and that's fine.
And I wonder if it's the same in different cultures, or is it just us? Don't know. We have a lot of superstitions in the United States alone. But I'll read the first paragraph, let you come in on the second one. We can talk about it. I found this article it's called lifehacker.com. Why Friday the 13th is considered to be bad luck. It says that Westerners have always had an issue with the number 13. Regardless of what day of the week it is, there's even a scientific name for the fear of the number. And I can't say that name because it's weird. Can you say it?
I'm having a hard time opening it up over here.
Oh, okay. It's triskaidekaphobia. Something phobia. Anyway, experts like Thomas Bernzler, a scientist at the University of Delaware, suggests this disdain for the number is because it's positioned after 12, which is considered to be a complete number by numerologists. Think about it. There are 12 months, 12 zodiac signs, 12 gods and of Olympus, 12 apostles of Jesus. The list goes on. And 13 is only divisible by 1 in itself. The number 13 is just beyond the perfect 12, and it makes people feel uneasy. What do you feel about that?
I don't know. I've always had good luck with a baker's dozen.
Well, yeah. And eggs.
Yeah, and eggs too. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's real. It's when you start getting into superstition and folks' beliefs, it's kind of real hard to really get into it without offending somebody. But it's just kind of like superstition, like the black cat crossing your path, or walking under a ladder, or opening an umbrella in the house. I mean, there's just a lot of that stuff out there that a lot of people take for as law for them, and I just never really understood that. I was raised that every day is a new day, and you take it as you come, and good things and bad things happen every day. So I mean, I'm not trying to not answer your question or not answer the article. It's just that just the way I was raised. I mean, it's just a whole lot different.
Yeah, we had a lot of superstitions growing up in the Cajun land, especially for my grandmother. You know, it's like, don't do this, don't do that. This is going to happen to you if you do that. Don't you know this already? And it's like they try to pound it in your head.
Right.
So
what are some of the superstitions from over there on your grandmother's side?
Well, you can't, trying to remember, you can't walk in a graveyard in a certain, like now they have like roads that run each section, you know, like paved roads. But when I was a child, and I'm not going to give my age because I'm in my 50s, but there wasn't those paved roads. They were dirt roads. And you know how in a graveyard, in a cemetery, between each gravestone, they only have a certain amount of space that you can walk through each. And you couldn't walk like too close to one and too close to the other. Right. So it's like walking a tightrope trying to get between them, because if you touched your foot too close to one of them, they were going to come and get you. You know, so it kind of made you afraid of cemeteries. It's just crazy stuff like that, you know, and you remember these things and you kind of want to teach it to your children because you think that is correct because that's how you were brought up. Right. But there's also, you know, the Christianity part of it, which is the second paragraph of this article. If you couldn't bring it up, right? You want me to read the second one?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time opening it.
Okay. It says another likely source of the superstition is Christianity. During the Middle Ages, Stuart Weiss, which is VYSC, a professor of psychology at Connecticut College, says Judas, the apostle who betrayed Jesus, is to blame. He was the 13th guest at the Last Supper, and Jesus' crucifixion then took place on a Friday, also known as Hangman's Day. As Weiss puts it, it was all a sort of double whammy of 13 falling on an already nervous day. Other biblical scholars point out that Eve supposedly tempted Adam on a Friday, and that Cain killed his brother Abel on Friday the 13th. Also, Philip V of France supposedly arrested hundreds of the Knights Templar on Friday the 13th of October, 1307, perpetuating the day as a dark day. So that's a lot of Friday the 13th. So maybe that's where they get it. Stuart Weiss.
It sounds like. I'm sorry.
It says Stuart Weiss is to blame. No, who did it say was to blame?
I didn't hear. I apologize.
It said somebody was to blame, but I forgot who it said who was to blame.
Oh, I don't know.
Anywho, so yeah. So maybe it's a lot of Friday the 13th in the Bible that puts it all to blame.
Well, I just hope that sometime tonight I don't see Jason Voorhees standing outside the door.
Right. And how many parts they had? 5, 6?
No, it was actually, I think, closer to 12 or 13 of them.
Oh, wow. Well, 13. Yeah. 13.
Yeah.
That would make sense. Yep. Wow. Well, I guess we don't have any black cats coming to us tonight.
I don't think so either.
We'll be asleep, so we won't have to worry about that stuff.
Well, I got 2 dogs over here to make sure that there's no cats around the house, so I guess we're okay.
Yeah. And then you think of the clock only goes to 12 o'clock. So
I was
you
just
think
trying to
that
think
has
how that
anything
would be
to do?
superstitious.
No,
I'm sorry?
there's a lot of things that end with 12, but not 13.
Yeah. Well, I know they don't. Let's see. I think high buildings or hotels and stuff like that, they don't have a 13th floor. They go from 12 to 14 most of the time, from what I understand. Yeah, I don't think that they have a 13th floor on some buildings. When you go into a elevator and you can see 12 to 14, that's a superstition to have a 13th floor for some reason.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of older buildings in New York that the elevators went from 12 to 14, and you think you're going crazy because you want to see what's on 13th floor, but you can't get there.
Hey, maybe if the 13th floor would open, it would freak you out, huh? If it doesn't have a 13, but it opens up and it says 13. I don't know if I would want to get off the elevator.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so either. With my luck, I'd probably end up seeing some Civil War hospital, and I'd freak out.
Right. We think of The Shining.
Yeah.
Get off on the floor with the twins. Remember the twins?
Oh yeah.
The little twin girls.
The father killed him with an axe, right?
I don't remember that part.
Well, I think it was the earlier caretaker, the one that Jack Nicholson would talk to.
Oh, okay. The older black man you talking about?
No, that was the cook, or I think it was or maintenance man or something like that. He's the one that had the Shining. That was talking with the little boy, but
I remember the guy behind the bar.
Yeah, it was a guy that he talked to in the bathroom once. I think that he addressed that with him. Something about how he had gone crazy and killed his family with an axe.
I'm gonna have to watch that all over again. Now I have questions. That's okay. I can find it on Netflix. So what else has been going on with you?
Well, I've been working a missing child's case. I went out and did a witness recall for somebody that had claimed to have seen the person that took the child, and I got some more information for the police, and hopefully that'll help them out.
Wow,
This
I hope
kid's
it
been
all
gone now
works out.
yeah, me too. This kid's been gone for about 2 weeks now, and the first 48 hours, they always say that is the most dire, because statistically, if you don't find them in 48 hours, it's real tough after that.
Do you guys have like psychics on the case with you?
Sometimes I worked with Annette Martin one time, who was working on a case in Alabama with the postal police out there, and some folks were knocked out and they took their money bags, and she had gone out there because they wanted to see what the person, what the one person that died, what happened, so they can kind of get an idea of who the perpetrator was. And she told me to go out there, they flew me out, and I worked with witnesses, like 7 witnesses, in a period of a week to pull information up. I understand the case is still open though. They got some information from me and some from Annette, but I guess nothing was really would break the case open. And that was like 8 years ago.
Wow. And that's mostly like the case you're working right now, that's around the Texas area. Is that where you stay, Texas?
Oh, the case I'm working right now, yes, this is in Houston.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of cases in Houston. That's a pretty big city.
Yeah, I get a lot in Houston, Galveston, you name it. I'm there pretty much.
Did they have a lot like during the flood, that recent flood they had that damaged what was it? Was it Dallas, Galveston? When was it last year? When was it last year that heavy flood that
Oh yeah,
pretty much wiped out, what was it? Was it Dallas or close to you?
well, I mean, there was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot of flooding all around. I can't remember. Round Rock, I think, got hammered the worst, and then and I think Houston wasn't too far behind it. I know out here in Humble, 59 was like underwater. I mean, you couldn't even see the freeway. We were lucky over here. We everything was flooding around us, but our house was dry.
Hello, Joe.
Hey, Josie.
Yes, it's Josie.
Hi, this is Bernadine.
Hi,
And
Bernadine.
we have
How you
Pete
doing?
with us tonight. We're doing great.
Oh, great. Good. Can you
Yeah,
hear me okay?
we can hear you okay.
Okay, good.
I can hear you fine.
Eileen's out. She had surgery, so Pete is helping us out tonight, Pete Haviland. So we're going to both be interviewing you. And I had told the listeners earlier a little bit about you, a little bit that I found on your website. You know, you're author of Visits from Heaven. You're a motivational speaker and an afterlife expert. Can you give us a little bit more on your bio?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about how this all started, if you want to hear about that.
Sure.
Because really, you know, if you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be doing this, Bernadine, I would have said you were nuts. But I had a spiritual experience in 2003 where my husband's friend who died in the World Trade Center attacks of 9/11 came to me in a very lucid, vivid dream. Now, I'd never met him before, okay? I only saw pictures of him. So when I had this dream, I walked into this room and I come to this door and I see desk and windows everywhere. All of a sudden, I look up and I see his friend. Now, again, I never met him before, but yet in the dream, I knew it was him. And he looked at me and he said, Josie, thank you for mentioning me in your book. And what he meant by that, in my first book, Footprints in the Sand, I mentioned him in the epilogue of the book. He had written an inspirational email about the death of his father before he died, and I included it in the book. So when he said that to me, for whatever reason, I replied back. And when I say I replied telepathically. You know, the winner words is all mind-to-mind communication. And I said, Rich, I said, you have to prove to me that this is really you. And when I said that, he went over to a desk, picked up a flip phone. It was like one of those cell phones, you know. He opened it up, and he showed me, it was a picture of him, his wife, and his son, and he said, Boston is okay. Now, I had no idea whatsoever why he said that. I just understood that that was a message that I needed to get to his wife. So to make a very long story short, when I came out of it, okay, I woke up and I called my husband, and he was already at work. I called my husband, and I told him what happened, and I said, listen, you have to call Richard's wife. You have to tell her Boston is okay. Well, how do you think he replied? He replied like I was off my rocker, I was crazy, I'm not doing it. But I told him, I said, we compromised. And I said, listen, how about if I send you an email telling you what happened, and you can forward it to his wife's sister, because they knew each other. They worked in the same industry. So that's what we did. And as soon as he sent the email, he said he regretted it. And I didn't. I was happy because I knew that's what I was supposed to do. Okay. Well, 2 weeks later, we're on vacation, and he gets a message on his BlackBerry, my husband. And basically what she said was, how did she know? Because Rich's wife had a brother in Boston. Now remember, I never met him, never met his family, nothing. She had a brother in Boston, and at the time, she was considering selling her home and moving to Boston. But she felt guilty because she had purchased a home right before he died, so she felt guilty selling the house. So his message to me then, tell her Boston is okay, made perfect sense. So could you imagine my shock? And it's kind of like when you have an experience like that, when you have a spiritual experience like that, you just can't shake it, And what I ended up doing is I ended up researching the phenomenon, and that resulted in my book, Visits from Heaven, which includes evidential afterlife stories from around the world. And after that, I followed it with Visits to Heaven, which is about near-death experiences, and Divine Visits, which is about divine encounters, and then my latest book, A Call from Heaven, which is about deathbed phenomena. So, and I'm researching another book, and I'm also doing fiction, as a matter of fact. So, I've always loved to write, but I never thought I'd be writing about, spiritual phenomena. But as I say, everything happens for a reason. And I feel very grateful to be able to do what I do, and help people understand that life doesn't end and love truly never dies.
Right. I also have dreams like that, and I've been keeping journals like since I was a teenager. I've had these dreams, but when I was in my 30s, I started keeping a journal. It's lucid dreams. And whenever a spirit comes to me in my dream and gives me a message, most of the time I don't know if the message is for someone else. It's like in a riddle to me because I'm not supposed to understand what it means. But if I don't know if this happens to you, but if I don't give the message, they keep coming to me over and over and over and over, driving me insane until I actually give that message. Even though it sounds crazy to me because I don't understand what the message means or what the person's trying to tell me, what I do is I give the message to the person it's supposed to be for, and I explain to them what the person looks like that's giving me the message in my dream because I don't know who it is, but they do. It always turns out that the person I give the message to knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly, and that's why it's important that we give the message because, like in my case, I didn't understand what Boston is okay meant. I understood that, he wanted me to get it to his wife, but I didn't understand what the message meant. And I mean, thinking about it now, had I not given her the message, I mean, my life would be totally different. So it's interesting, because what happened was after I wrote, Visits from Heaven comes out. And one day I was doing a radio show in New York. And before I left, I happened to mention to my husband, I said, it's really interesting that all this happened, the book came out, but yet I haven't heard, quote unquote, anything from Rich. And I didn't get any messages from him since that first dream. So we ended up going to New York, And we're standing out in like a common area waiting for the producer to call us into the studio. And all of a sudden, there was a psychic medium there, a 17-year-old psychic medium who was going to do the show with me. And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, Josie, I have a gentleman here for you." So when he said that, what did I do? I turned around. I turned around looking for this gentleman. And he said, "No, no, no, in spirit." And so he started to describe the man. And I realized, oh, my God, he's describing Rich. Okay?
Mhm.
So he starts telling me, he goes to me, he wants to tell you that you were led to do what you do, that you were led to ALE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. ALE Press was the publisher for Visits from Heaven. New Page Books is the publisher for A Call from Heaven, but originally I was with ALE Press. And he said, he wants to tell you that you were led to ALE. Oh, and by the way, he says, the book that you think is coming out when it's coming out, it's going to come out 2 months later. And at the time, I was waiting for my book, Visits to Heaven, to be released, okay? So, they called us into the studio. We never got to finish that conversation. And what happened was I never got to talk to him or anything. And 2 weeks later, I found out from my publisher that the book wasn't coming out in December. It was coming out in February. It was coming out 2 months later, just like that psychic medium said.
Wow.
So, it really blew my mind. I mean, and so many things have happened, that proved to me that I was led to do what I do. And, it wasn't easy, honestly. It wasn't easy because, when it first happened, I was like most people, I was afraid to talk about it. I didn't want to say anything because I thought people would think I was nuts. And I happened to be talking to my sister-in-law about it. And she said, "Josie, don't you realize that you've been given a gift?" And you know what? It hit me. I said to myself, yeah, I have been given a gift. And I need to get the message out there. I need to help the bereaved. So, that's what started me on this journey. And, it's been a blessing, honestly.
Wow. Pete, you have any questions?
Well, I'd like to know how far back your ability goes to, and what was the defining moment that led you to believe that to do this. And does it get more in depth than what you just mentioned?
Well, that's an interesting question because people always ask me, well, did you always believe in the afterlife, or was it this, this sudden experience and all of a sudden you believe in the afterlife and you're going, but honestly, I have always believed in God. I have always believed in the afterlife, but there's a difference between believing and knowing, okay? Let me give you an example. When I was pregnant with my daughter, Erica, okay, my firstborn,
Okay.
and the doctor called me and told me, and this is before my experience with Rich, but the doctor had called me and he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your daughter had, the baby, I don't know if it was a girl or a boy at the time, but he said the baby has Down syndrome. So I had what they call an AFP test, and it tested, it checks the chromosomes, and that's what he told me. And of course, I was devastated. I was born with a disability known as cerebral palsy, so getting that news from the doctor wasn't easy. And I ended up going and getting an amnio done to see how bad it was and everything. And that night, I got on my knees and I prayed to my grandmother. Now, I believe in praying to those on the other side, okay? So I got on my knees, I prayed to my grandmother. And that night, when I went to sleep, I had a vivid dream, another vivid dream. And in the dream, my grandmother lived in an old 2-story house. I walked into the foyer, and there were steps that led to the second floor. It was about 12 steps that led to the second floor. I look up, and I see my grandmother standing at the landing. She was holding a baby, and I knew it was a baby girl, and she said to me telepathically, she said, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." Well, the next day, I got a call from the OBGYN, and he told me that the baby was fine. So, did I always believe? Yes. But like I said, when you have an experience like this, with Rich, it was really, a known beyond known. So I would have to say that that was definitely the turning point for me, because honestly, I'll tell you right now, had I not had that experience, I know I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Maybe I would be doing it to a certain extent, but not the way I'm involved now. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that answers it fine. Now, since you have been talking to these folks, have they gotten into what happens when we die, and have they gotten into any kind of what they see, what they feel, what they experience?
Yeah, sure. The second book was about near-death experiences. So, I spoke to a lot of people about what they experienced when they got to the other side. And a lot of people talk about, seeing the bright light. A lot of people talk about, the tunnel, the feelings of peace, going through a life review, seeing the deceased relatives. Those are some examples of, what people say they are aware of when they get over to the other side. And not only that, a lot of them are given knowledge about the future. A lot of them are given knowledge about the future. But majority of them do go through a life review. So that's very interesting. But that was pretty much what the second, when I wrote Visits from Heaven, and Visits from Heaven was about afterlife communication, I thought to myself, because as I was doing research for that book, I kept hearing about all these near-death experiences. So I decided to follow that up with Visits to Heaven, which is about, like I said, which is about NDEs. But they all go, what's interesting about NDEs? No matter how many people I talk to, okay, the NDEs are very different, yet so much alike, if that makes any sense. There's always a different element in these NDEs. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was not aware of what, her experience was called. She had a near-death experience after giving birth to her daughter. So we're on the phone, and she starts telling me about the experience, and she says to me, "Oh, my God," she said, "you don't understand, Josie." She said, "It was pitch black." And I said to her, I said, "Chris," I said, "you experienced a near-death experience." And I told her, tell me what happened. And what she said was, she was aware of a presence, okay? She was aware of a presence, but she couldn't see anything because it was dark. And this voice, or this presence, said to her, "Hard times are ahead, but everything's going to be okay." So she comes out of this, and what happened is her father ended up passing away. And a lot of things happened in the family. So what she was told in her near-death experience actually materialized. But she wasn't aware that it was a near-death experience. She didn't know what to call it. I think that there are a lot of people who have these experiences that keep it quiet and don't talk about it. But I can tell you that is changing. Just from what I did, Visits from Heaven, okay? Visits from Heaven came out 2009, 2010 to now, a lot more people are coming forward with their experiences. So it's hard to pinpoint how many of these. When I was doing research on deathbed phenomena, for instance, a lot of people say that it's about 50% of people having these experiences. Other people say it's as high as 60%. Other studies say as high as 80%. But one of the things that I talk about in the book I don't really think that numbers really matter, because there's a guy, you know who William James is, the famous poet. William James once said, to upset the conclusion that all crows are black, it's enough to find one white crow. Okay? To upset the conclusion that all crows are black, it's enough to find one white crow. So basically what he's saying is, numbers are not important. What's important is that these experiences, these spiritual phenomena, the supernatural is happening. It is happening. It's happening all around us.
Yeah, it's more common now. It's more common to speak about it now. People can be more open than they were in the past about it.
Absolutely. I definitely see that shift. Look at what's happening. Here you have your show, you have all the the television shows, the movies that are coming out, more and more books about the paranormal. So, and I have, for instance, a group on Facebook called Visits from Heaven. It's the same title of my book, okay? And the reason I started that group, because I wanted to give people a forum to be able to come on, share their experiences, and know that they're not alone. And it is just amazing, the stories that people share. I had a woman share an experience the other day where she said when her mother passed away, she was feeling some of her mother's symptoms, and she couldn't understand what she was experiencing. And I said to her, what you felt was a shared death experience. And I clarified it for her. It's known as an SDE. And she said to me, oh my God, I knew it, thank you. So it gives people a clarification, and it helps people to understand that they're not alone. And, like I said, you'd be surprised how many people have shared their experiences just in my group alone. And there's many groups out there.
That's interesting, because I've never heard of a shared death experience unless it was like a twin. You know how twins can feel when something's happening to the other twin?
Yeah, like your intuition or whatever. No, this is more than that. There's a story in the book. There's a woman, Annie Kopp, and she's in the UK, okay? And her mom is in the US. So when her mother is on her deathbed, her daughter in the UK starts gagging and can't breathe for no apparent reason. And she goes over to the phone to call the hospital. And when her sister picks up, she can hear her mother gagging and doing the same thing, on the phone. And she realized, oh my God, she realized that she was experiencing some of the symptoms her mother is experiencing. But you know what I think is even more amazing, though? I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but when I was working on A Call from Heaven, one of the highlights for me is what they call peak Indarian experiences, okay? And what that means is when people on their deathbed mention the presence of a deceased person of whose death they had no knowledge. And what I mean by that, okay, there was Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia mentioned a story about a kid named Eddie Cuomo. Now, Eddie Cuomo was in a coma, okay? He had very, very high fever. Well, when he finally opened his eyes, he started telling his parents about all these people that he saw. And he mentioned all these people that were deceased. He mentioned his grandpa Como, his Aunt Rosa, his Uncle Lorenzo, he went on and on. But then all of a sudden, he shocked those present, his parents and the doctors present, because he said he also saw his 19-year-old sister, Teresa. Well, his parents got very upset because his sister was away at college at the time. At least they thought she was fine and away at college, okay? So he says to the son, what are you talking about? Teresa's away at college. I just talked to her 2 days ago. And he says to him, no, Dad, I saw her, and she told me it wasn't my time. I had to go back. Well, when the father and mother left the hospital and they got home, they found a message from the school. The daughter died in a car accident that night, but they didn't know.
Wow.
So how can you explain away something like that? You know, you just can't. So to me, that was one of the highlights in the book. And the other thing that I thought was very, very interesting, a term called terminal lucidity. And what that means is when those on their deathbed suddenly have a return of mental clarity, okay? So there's a guy who is doing a survey at the university in Vienna, okay? Dr. Alexander Bethany. And what he's studying is Alzheimer's patients that suddenly have mental clarity right before they die. And what's interesting about that, and one of the things that he told me, he said, you know, Alzheimer's kills nerve cells in the brain, okay? It actually kills tissue in the brain. So when these people suddenly, you know, have terminal lucidity or, you know, mental clarity right before they die, and they're able to say their goodbyes and talk to their parents and be coherent and everything, okay? The brain stays exactly the way it was before. It doesn't suddenly become alive and fill up with new nerve cells. It stays exactly the way it was before. So how do you explain something like that? And then
Well,
more recently,
Josie,
yeah.
that actually happened to my grandmother.
Really? What happened?
She had Alzheimer's. She was in hospice, and she was in a fetal position, like her body just curled up, and she stayed like that for a long time. We couldn't straighten her out or anything. And she couldn't speak. And then my aunt had told me about this, what you just explained, that it would happen to her, you know, that it happens to most people. And I'm like, there's no way. I mean, she can't speak.
Right.
And she can't sit up. She can't do any of that. She's like, watch and see. Well, she called me a couple of days later. This is a couple of days before my grandmother passed. She called me and she's like, you need to come over here right now because your grandmother's sitting up in bed and speaking to us, but don't let her know what's going on, because I mean, they didn't want to shock her to let her know she's fixing to pass, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I get over there and she's doing exactly that. It's like she wasn't sick at all. She's sitting up in bed, which I didn't think was possible, you know, in the condition she was. And she was speaking to us, and she asked me if she can come and see my new house. So we had just finished building a house that she never been to. And we had spoke about it to her, but she couldn't respond back, you know, when we were talking to her about it. And I'm like, well, when you get better, you know, you can come and see my house. Well, I didn't think she'd understand what I was saying, but I was just talking to her. She was in a nursing home at the time. And she's like, yeah, I want to come and see your house. You know, I want to come and visit. And I told her, I said, yeah, you can come and visit anytime. And like, this didn't last long, maybe an hour. You know,
Yep.
the family was around the bed. We talked to her as long as we could. Then she laid down, she curled back up in the fetal position, and she couldn't speak anymore. So it was right back to where she was. And it shocked us all. It's like, this was just like something we've never seen before.
And how long after that did you pass?
Like 2 days.
Yeah, see? Boy, you could have been part of the study.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's another one just like that. His name is Dr. Scott Haig. He's in New York. Okay, this is another one that really amazed me. There was a patient that had lung cancer. The cancer got so bad that it spread through his body and to his brain. Now, he was completely, he couldn't move, he couldn't talk, he couldn't do anything, all right? Well, right before he died, he suddenly, snapped out of it and was able to talk, was able to move, was able to say goodbye to his family. And I think in his case, it was only about 10 to 15 minutes. But he said his goodbye, he said his goodbyes, then he laid back down and he died. So, again, that's pretty, you can't very easily deny something like that. And then when it comes to these deathbed phenomena, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of things that they come through. And the number one is visual. A lot of times when they're on their deathbed, they see deceased loved ones. They see, angelic figures, whatever it may be, but they see visual, they see people. And the second one is gateway. A lot of times when they're on the deathbed, they see a portal, actually an opening in the room. There's a story in the book about a girl who's in the hospital with her dad. And he's laying on the hospital bed, and all of a sudden he's saying, "Oh wow!" He's looking up at the ceiling, and he's telling them, "Isn't the sky beautiful?" He's seeing the sky, but of course, no one else in the room can see it. And shortly after that, before that, by the way, her sister passed away about 6 months before the father passed away. So the next day, he kept reaching forward, saying that he had to go somewhere. And that's another thing that they do. A lot of people on their deathbed reach forward, as if to go somewhere or to go with someone. And she noticed her father doing that. And she said all of a sudden, she saw like this mist, and she heard her sister's voice, the sister that passed away. And the sister said to her, "Don't worry, heaven is beautiful." And when she told me, I just thought that was, wonderful. And I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you how this all started with me. I went for a physical. There was a reason behind all of my books, okay? But when it comes to A Call from Heaven, I happened to be going to the doctor for a physical. And he and I have a very good relationship, and, we talk about the work he and I both do, and I walk in, and his name is Dr. Toro, and Dr. Toro looked at me and said, "Hey, Josie, are you working on any more books?" And at the time, I was working on my book, Divine Visits, okay? And he goes, I said, Dr. Toro, I was talking to a doctor, and he said that these experiences are happening more and more. And he surprised me because he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I know." And I'm kind of looking at him going, "What do you mean, yeah, I know?" And he started to tell me that same week, okay, he was at his hospital, and he said he went in to see a patient, and her family was, and friends were in the room. He went up to the woman's bed, and he told her that they were going to transport her to another facility because they couldn't do anything more for her at that hospital. And he said she shocked him, and she looked at him and she said, "No, it's my time." And she told my doctor that her grandson, who he found out was killed in the Iraq War, okay, she said her grandson was there in the room with her. And he said she proceeded to carry out this conversation with her grandson while all these people in the room witnessing this. So I said to him at the time, I said, "Hey, Dr. Toro, do you think she was hallucinating?" And knowing that she wasn't. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, no." He said, "Absolutely not." He said she was very coherent. He said so coherent that she was joking with her best friend who was in the room, saying, "Listen, when I'm gone, that doesn't mean you could date my husband." So he was, she was completely coherent and joking with her friend. And he said, all of a sudden, she said, "Okay, I'm ready." And within minutes, she passed away. And this was in the presence of the doctor. This was in the presence of her family, her friends. Everybody saw it. And I actually got to meet the daughter. So when I heard that story, I was really, amazed by it. And I had, one of the things that I wanted to write about was deathbed phenomena. And after hearing about that story, I knew that that was my sign to write the book. So that was the beginning of my research for A Call from Heaven.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this: throughout your whole journey that you have, that you're doing now, have you come across any information or experiences with people having um, reincarnation or past lives? Have you heard from on the other side about this? And if you have, what is it?
I'll tell you, one of the things people ask me about reincarnation all the time. Now,
Okay.
I was born and raised Roman Catholic, so it always bothered me. It always bothered me to think of the idea of reincarnation, because growing up, I wanted to think that, hey, I die, go to heaven, and that's it. But all the evidence does point to reincarnation, and I'll tell you one of the stories that really shook me to the core with that. There's a little girl. There's a little girl in India. Her name was Shanti Devi, and the girl, she was, I guess, around 7 at the time, and she kept telling her parents that she had a husband in another village. She kept talking about this other family, gave the name of the husband, and it got to the point where the parents actually took her to this other village and took her to this. The former husband, according to her, had a business. So they walk in. She sees this husband. She tells the husband that she is actually his wife. And what's shocking about that story is she tells the man that when she was his wife, she buried money in the yard. She took them to the spot where she buried this money. They dug it up and they found it.
Wow.
So, so again, when I first read that story, I'm like, okay, you might, what I always say is, your beliefs, whatever your beliefs are, they don't change the truth, So it doesn't matter what I want to believe. If I don't want to believe in reincarnation, if I don't want to believe it's real, what's real is real. And you can't really, how do you explain away something like that? And then there's that. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, there's that other story about, I think his name is James. He was a World War II pilot. And that was another thing. This kid suddenly knows everything about, these planes, and is naming these people who were killed in World War II. And the family did research, and they actually found that they were real people that died in the war. And he named the person that he was. They found that person as well. They found out, how he died, and all the information that this little boy had, was actually correct. So, yeah. I'm actually, I never had a past life regression before, okay? But I have an appointment to get one done in October. So I'm curious to see what happens, what I end up finding out. I'll let you guys know.
Okay, we'd like to hear that. Was it Dr. Stevenson that was studying reincarnation in children?
At the University of Virginia. He did tons of research on reincarnation. I went to visit the University of Virginia over the summer, and I met Dr. Bruce Grayson, who I greatly admire. He's done a lot of research as well. But they have cases on record from around the world, so it's pretty amazing. And then when they do these, another thing, they have Brian Weiss, who did these past life regressions, and people would take on, you know, different personalities and different voices and things like that. So again, you know, I might not want to believe it, but the truth is the truth. You can't easily explain something like that. So I'm curious to find out what's going to happen when I have one done.
You know, I've done a few regressions on some of my clients, and
Have you?
I have seen what. Yes, ma'am. I have seen what you're talking about. I've seen facial changes. I've heard different vocal inflections, even different accents. So yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it happens.
And what do you, you know, like, you know what I found interesting when I was working on Visits to Heaven, I did a chapter on reincarnation. And one of the things that they say is that when you have a birthmark, that can be an indication of a past life, like something that happened in a past life. Now, on my right hand, I have a fairly large birthmark. It's in the
Hey,
shape.
Josie.
Yes.
I hate to cut you right here, but we have to go to break. And
Okay, good.
when we come back, we'll hear about that birthmark.
Okay.
Guys, we're up
Okay.
against a break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to
All
the
right.
Supernatural Substation, and we will be back shortly.
And you are back.
Hi, guys. This is the Supernatural Substation. We're coming back from break. Before we left, Miss Josie was telling us about a specific, what was it, birthmark, and how you got it?
Well, we were talking about, reincarnation, and one of the things that they talk about is that a lot of times you have a birthmark that's related to your previous life, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. In my book, Visits to Heaven, which is about NDEs, I talk about this one guy. His name was Jeffrey Keene, and he felt a connection to this. He was like, looking at Civil War battlefields, okay? And for some reason felt really sick when he went on this one battlefield and couldn't understand why. Well, he meets this psychic medium who tells him that he was a general at one point, and when he went to go visit these battlefields, he picked up a magazine. And all of a sudden, he opens up the magazine, he sees the picture of General John Gordon. And the guy resembled him, like, the resemblance is absolutely incredible, okay? But what's interesting about it is Jeffrey Keene has birthmarks in unusual places that match battle wounds that General John Gordon had.
Wow.
Okay, so the markings on his body matched the wounds from the battlefield of General John Gordon. So that's what they say. So I look at my hand sometimes and wonder if that's true. I mean, I don't know, but I do have a very pretty large birthmark on my right hand. I've always hated it. I don't know. Maybe I'll find out when they put me under and I'm under hypnosis. I do my past life regression. I'll let you guys know.
Oh, yeah.
I would specifically. I would make sure that you specifically ask them to question it and find out what time frame and all that. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I really am. But before
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, before we were talking about the different types of deathbed phenomena, and I just wanted to finish that. I mentioned visual, I mentioned gateway. The third way that they appear is atmospheric changes. A lot of times you'll see a temperature change in the room, a bright light, you'll see mist leaving the body. That's another example. A fourth one is synchronicity. Unexplained occurrences such as clocks stopping at the moment of death. I talk about this one incredible story. In this one house, every single clock was stopped at the time of this woman's death. Okay? The fifth one is dreams, and these are, of course, very common. Dreams are the most common way that our loved ones give us a visit from heaven or an afterlife communication. And dreams are also very common in deathbed phenomena. There's one story in the book where a woman has a dream, and in the dream, her mother is saying goodbye to her. So she's saying goodbye to her mother in the dream, and all of a sudden, she's woken up by the sound of a telephone. And when she gets the phone, it's the hospital telling her that her mother had just passed away. So her mother came to her in the dream to say goodbye. The sixth one is auditory, which is, sometimes they can hear music. They can hear music at the time of their death. And the seventh one we talked about before, we talked about shared deathbed phenomena, and that's the seventh one. So I just wanted to make sure I got through all of those.
Let me, as you continue with the study, have you ever dealt with speaking to anybody from the other side, and do they ever get into talking to you about communicating through like EVPs or ITC? And if they have, how does that work?
how to, well, a lot of times, you can use, now we have digital recorders, okay? And you could,
well, no,
I
was talking about but I was talking about from their side, not from our
From the
recorders
spirit
here.
side.
I mean, how does it work? How are they able to come through? I don't know, but I'll tell you, the bottom line is, we are, when you break down the body, when you look at us now, we look solid.
Right.
But if you break the body down, we are energy. And when we die, we go back to being energy. And, in their energy form, they are able to communicate with us and manipulate electronic devices. It happens all the time. How exactly? I don't know. I mean, I'll be able to know that when I get over the other side myself. But I can tell you that we are essentially energy, and when we die, we go back to, being energy. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, not the other way around.
Right. Okay. And have you ever dealt with anybody that you would talk to on the other side that might have committed suicide? And if so, is the travel or trip for them different than what you've experienced with some of the other folks?
People ask me about, I mean, I'm not a medium, so I've never made a connection on my own, but I've definitely talked to people who have, certainly. Okay. And one of the questions that I get in my group all the time is, well, my son committed suicide, my daughter committed suicide, and does that mean that they're going to hell? No, it absolutely doesn't. When I spoke to mediums, for example, I have yet to come across one who's told me, okay, yeah, this person committed suicide and this person was in hell. They say that just is not true. Okay. There is no hell. There's just forgiveness. I mean, they experience the same thing that everybody else experiences. And while we're on the topic, I don't believe in a hell with a fire and all that. What I think that through my research with near-death experiencers, what happens is when they go over to the other side and they have that life review, okay, they're able to experience the pain they caused through your eyes. Now, say I did something to you. Say I really hurt you, okay? Now, I go over to the other side. Now, I'm able to experience the pain that I caused you through your eyes. But it's more as it's not in a judging way. In reality, what they say is, what the majority of the people who go to the other side and come back and have these near-death experiences, what they say is, we are the ones that judge ourselves. There's no God over there judging us and sending us to hell. It's us that we judge ourselves. If that makes
perfect sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense because we create our own issues most of the time. So if you think you're going to go to hell, you put yourself there because that's what you're thinking.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I was reading a story the other day, and this man explained that he had a near-death experience. He went over to the other side, and he was asked, he asked this supreme being, am I going to hell? What is this? Is this heaven? And the response was, if you believe it's heaven, if you want it to be heaven, yes, it's heaven. If you want it to be hell, yes, it's hell. So, we create what we want it to be.
Right.
Would
you consider this area that these the people that passed over are in? You think it's a different parallel universe or something like that? I mean, I know it's kind of stupid to say, but as you said, and I believe it too, is that energy is energy. Cannot be created or destroyed. It just, it is what it is. So,
well, how I would describe it, I was just, what they say is there are different levels. on the other side. So
Okay.
there's different dimensions to what we call heaven. So,
Okay.
and we are attracted to the level that attracts our energy. So the more evolved we are, the higher the level. That's what they say. They say there's several different dimensions on the other side. So it's like when we die, you like go through one door and into another. We're basically going from one dimension to another. I talked to this one woman. It was very interesting because she said to me, 1 minute I was in this car accident, and the next minute I'm over there in heaven in this beautiful open field. She said, but it was like instantaneous. Like all of a sudden, boom. 1 minute I die, and the next second I'm in heaven. But there was no pain or anything like that. Another thing that people say is that the body, the spirit, will leave the body right before an impact, or they leave the body right slightly before death. So they don't feel any pain. They say they didn't feel the force of the impact. So that's also interesting.
What about,
people ask me all the time, what it is that I learned from all of this. And I like to repeat the words of Robert Frost because I think it sums it up. And one of the things that he said in 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. And I think that pretty much says it all. But not only does life go on, it also says a lot about who we are, because what that says is we are far more than the body. If we weren't, then none of these spiritual phenomena would be real. None of these spiritual phenomena would be happening.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah. So.
Well, Josie, I have a question.
What was that?
I have a question.
Sure.
Me and Pete are paranormal investigators. We have teams, in our towns, and I know, people say you have free will. It's your choice to move to the other side. It's your choice to stay. What do you feel? What do you feel about the earthbound spirits that feel trapped here? Because that's how we get most of our evidence is from spirits, that have problems that are still here. And, the people, our clients, call us for that because they don't know how to help the spirits cross over, or it's a bad spirit or negative spirit, or, however they were in life, they will be in death, or something else supernatural. How do you feel about the spirits that stay on our plane?
Well, what happens is, and I can tell you, I don't know how much time we have, but I had an experience of my own. But what happens is they feel an attachment here, or they're afraid to move on because of, maybe they committed a crime or they did something really bad. So they're afraid of going to the other side. They're afraid of what they're going to have to face on the other side.
They're afraid. Mostly, they're afraid of judgment sometimes.
Yeah, and that pretty much keeps their energy here. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a psychic medium, and I asked him. I said, how do you prevent something like that? And he said to me, don't have any regrets. Don't have any attachments to here, because sometimes when you're holding a grudge or whatever the case may be, it's hard for your energy to move on. But interestingly, the more we understand about the afterlife, okay, the more we understand that life doesn't end, that there is life after death, the easier it is for us to make that transition. Okay? So sharing this information is so important. You know, that's what I mean. I honestly feel blessed to be able to do what I do, and it's wonderful when people come up to me and say that, you know, my books or my stories have helped them in some way, because to me that's what it's all about. It's all about helping other people and sharing the message. But how much time do we have?
We still have about 20 minutes.
Okay, I'll tell you a quick story. I had an amazing experience. What happened was, my daughter was about 6 years old, I guess, at the time, and she kept saying that things were moving in her room, and you know, that there was somebody in her room and all kinds of stuff, and you know, we didn't think much of it. I thought, okay, she's just imagining things, and it got to the point where she would run into a room and want to sleep with us, and it started to get concerning. Okay.
How old
so one
was
day
she
I'm
at
on
the time?
She was about 6 at the time.
Okay.
So I'm on the phone with a friend of mine who is a psychic medium. His name is Anthony Kinata. We're on the phone, and I said to him, Anthony, you know, Leah has been complaining about somebody being in her room. I don't know, you know. I was just making conversation, you know. I didn't think much of it. And all of a sudden, he says to me, "Well, hold on." So I'm on the other end. I'm thinking, okay, you know. So he comes back on the phone. He says, "Josie, you do have a spirit in your home." He said, "I'm getting the name Amanda or something that sounds like Amanda." And then he started describing, at the time, since then he's been here, but at the time he'd never been to my home. And at that time he was describing my 2 daughters. I have my daughter Erica, my oldest, and my daughter Leah, my youngest. And he's telling me who has the pink room, who has the purple room. And I was just shocked because he was describing my house, yet he'd never been here. Okay? So he said to me, he goes, she's saying that your daughter, you know, is often sick, and that she watches up, you know, over her and all this. And I thought, oh my God. And he said, you prop her head up on a pillow and all these things. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so true, because at the time she would get these really bad, you know, sinus infections all the time, and I would prop her head up on the pillow for the congestion, you know, and everything he was describing was true. So I said to myself, well, you know, you have to tell her to leave because she's scaring my daughter. And his response to that was, oh boy, she says she's not ready to leave. Well, all of a sudden, my maternal instincts kick in. And I'm standing there, I'm on the phone with this guy, and I said, oh yeah, well, you tell her. I said, oh yeah, well, you tell her that she better leave my daughter alone, and I'm going on and on, you know. And all of a sudden, he says to me, Josie, and I'm like, yeah. He says, you just did. She's standing right next to you. Wow. I mean, man, I looked and I laughed. I was like, oh my God. Like, what am I doing? I'm arguing with a ghost over here. I mean, this is crazy. So anyway, he says to me, listen, he said, do you have holy water? And I said, yes. He said, okay, you know, get the holy water. So I get the holy water. He said, I want you to sprinkle some holy water in your daughter's room as we pray, and I'm going to try to, you know, get her out of your home. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. I mean, I'm on the phone with a psychic medium. He tells me there's a ghost in my house. Now you're telling me to get holy water and you're going to get her out of my house. You know, I mean, come on. But I did what I was told. And he says to me, okay, she's no longer there. And he started describing my backyard at the time. I had a white vinyl fence. He described that. But interestingly, he said, she's showing me a clock. He's showing me a clock, and it's stuck between 8:45 and 9:45. And I said to him, well, there is no clock. And he said, yes, there is. She's showing it to me. And I'm like getting all defensive. All right, well, that ends. He tells me that this woman is no longer in my home. My daughter, guys, from that day forward, stopped complaining. She said that this figure was not, the spirit was not in her room anymore. That was amazing. But here's the kicker. Remember he mentioned that she said there was this clock between 8:45 and 9:45, and I kept saying there wasn't any, all right? Mm-hmm. Well, a week later, I have like this secretary in my living room, and I reach to the back to get something, and all of a sudden, I see an old clock that belonged to my mother and father. And what do you think it was stuck on? Right there in between 8:45 and 9:45, just like he said. I think I could have passed out. I don't know.
Wow.
Oh my God. I of course I called him up, and I'm like, oh my God. He's like, what's the matter? I said, 8:45, 9:45, So I took a picture of it. To me, that was really incredible. And he told me that she, had a connection to the house and didn't want to cross over. Now, what was it that he did that, made her agree to go? I don't know, but I'm just happy that she did. But like I said, from that day forward, my daughter stopped complaining, and she would come in almost daily complaining about the blinds moving and about somebody being in her room and crying and wanting to sleep with us. And then coincidentally, the day that I speak to him, it stops. And that's too much of a coincidence. And then the clock, that was really
the clock would have gotten me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should have seen, my face probably was as white as anything when that happened.
Sounds like that guy knew what he was doing. Because it's hard to tell, if a medium, is cold reading and stuff like that. But, I mean, the way it sounds is like he actually can see in your house.
Like I said, he said to me, he says, you have a white fence in your backyard. It was really, honestly, freaking me out because I was like, he was in Colorado at the time, and here I am in New Jersey, and he's describing my house, and even telling me, the color of my daughter's rooms, because at the time my one daughter, her room was pink, and my other daughter, her room was purple. Amazing.
Do out of body experiences fit into what you write about?
Of course. It took me a long time. Remember I mentioned before about the turning point for me and what led me into this research, my experience with my husband's son who died on 9/11. Well, yes. It took me a long time to understand the full extent of my experience, but I actually did have an out-of-body experience. What I couldn't understand at the time is I didn't tell you that, I kept it short, but after he tells me that Boston is okay, and I know that I got to get this message to his wife, I find myself sort of going through a window, and I'm on what looked like a street. And I look out, and I see him, and honestly, it looked like the bed of a pickup truck. That's how I would describe it. And he's standing behind his wife and son. And he looks at me, guys, and he's like, he pushes his hand forward and says, okay, go ahead, give her the message. And when he did that, I woke up in a sitting position, panting and out of breath, feeling like something hit me in my chest. And the other thing that's interesting about my experience, while I was, dreaming or whatever you want to call it, okay, I was aware of my body. Okay, so I was aware of my body on the bed, but I knew I was, out there. I knew that I was outside of my body. So I was actually having an out-of-body experience. So yes, and you'd be surprised how common these out-of-body experiences are. Many people talk about them.
Yes, I've had many.
Oh, you have? What happened?
Oh yeah. I've been above my house before, and when I guess come to my senses while I'm there, it's like, holy crap. I zoom back into my body, and my whole body jumps almost out of the bed. I mean, I've been out of my body and been in my mother-in-law's bedroom. I was living in a trailer behind her house at one time, and I remember and I've never been in her bedroom at all while they sleep, so I didn't know how her and my father-in-law slept. You don't go in your in-laws' room to see how they sleep in their bed, but I told her exactly how they were sleeping. Their dog was sleeping at the foot of the bed. The dog looked up at me, So, I mean, I've had many of these. I could write a book myself. I just don't know how, but I have like journals of things that's happened to me since I've been young. And that's what led me into the field that I'm in, trying to research and find answers and talk to others that have the same experiences I've had. I mean, I still have experiences to this day. So that's why I do what I do. And when people come to me, as clients or just emails asking me about things that they don't understand, sometimes I can answer the questions.
Well, that's typically what happens. I mean, look at me, look at you, okay? Typically, we have a spiritual experience, and it leads us to do, the work that we do. But like I really think that there is a reason for everything, and we are led to do what we do for a reason. I think we're supposed to share, this message. One of the things that I talk about in the book is a quote. It's called "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence," right? Carl Sagan, whatever, the guy who wrote that, the scientist. But what's interesting is what I consider, what you might consider extraordinary and what somebody else might consider extraordinary, I don't consider extraordinary because I experienced it. You know what I mean? For those of us who have had these experiences, no proof is necessary. Like I said before, it's a known beyond known. I can, go out and preach and tell everybody that there is life after death and share all these experiences. But some people are not going to believe or not going to even consider it until they have an experience themselves.
Yeah, and then they have those that are dedicated skeptics that no matter what,
exactly.
you can't sway them, and it's not, our job to do that. I mean, if we can help one person with what we know, what we've learned, our knowledge and what we do, if we can help one person, that's enough.
That's enough. And that's exactly how I look at it. I say, well, I'm meant to, if I do like a radio show or a TV show, whatever, and I'm able to reach one person, well, then I was meant to reach that one person. And some people, like you say, they're not going to believe no matter what. And I'll give you a quick example. My brother-in-law passed away in September, and my sister is really having a tough time. So I had a reading, a friend of mine, I've known him for a long time. His name is Jason Shields, and I never had a reading with him. So he said to me, Josie, let me give you a reading. I'm like, okay. So I'm on the phone with him, and he says to me, I have a brother figure here who's been waiting to talk to you. And I said to him, oh, that's my brother-in-law. And he said, yes. So he said, my brother-in-law died of lung cancer, and I would often take him for chemo. I have 2 daughters, and my brother-in-law and sister have no kids. So I would take him for chemo, and 9 times out of 10, he would get out of the car, turn, and say hi to my girls, say hi to my girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jason, that day, I'm on the phone with him, and he says to me, he's telling me to tell you, say hi to my girls, say hi to my girls. And I was like, wow. Then he said to me, oh, by the way, he says to tell your sister that he still sits in the lazy boy. Now, my sister bought him a lazy boy recliner when he became ill.
Right.
Now, he didn't say, I still sit in the recliner. He said, tell your sister he still sits in the lazy boy. Okay. So that there was a lot of things that he said, but those were 2 things that, for me, were very evidential. Okay. So I call my sister, who's extremely skeptical. She wants a sign, but she's extremely skeptical. And it's okay. And what I tell people all the time, it's good to be skeptical, but you have to be open-minded. Okay, there's a difference between being skeptical and closed-minded and skeptical and open-minded. Because when you're open-minded, you're open to exploring the unknown. You're open to, the other possibilities. So when I was on the phone with my sister, and I told her about the messages that he gave me, okay? Well, when I told her about the lazy boy, her reaction was, well, yeah, but, when people are sick, what do? You buy them a recliner. And I said to her, yeah, but he didn't say recliner. He said lazy boy. How did he know you had a lazy boy? Why would he even, So, what I'm trying to say is she was just not having it, no matter what I said. So you can't, like you were saying, there are some people you're not going to change no matter what. And I think that the difference for her would be when she receives a sign of her own, when he's able to connect with her, then that's what's going to make the difference. And that's what happens with a lot of people out there. They have to have their own experience. Like
Right.
a lot of people in my group, Visits from Heaven, on Facebook, they say that. They say, well, I hope this is true. I keep asking for a sign and I don't receive anything, so I hope it's true. It is true. And when I tell people all the time, when you want a sign, ask for a sign. Talk to your loved one, because they can hear you. They can absolutely hear you.
Well, also too, as far as asking for a sign, a sign doesn't have to be something big and grandiose. It could be something small. And if you're not open to it, you're not going to see what the sign is. And I feel sorry for a lot of folks that do that, because they think that they know what it's going to be. And when you tell them, to be open and look and know what your loved one will do or what they would do, be open to that, but don't close your mind off.
Exactly. Like there's so many different signs, and like I mentioned before, the dream contact is the number one, because it's easier for them to connect with us when we are in our dream state.
Because we're not afraid in our dream state.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's also evasive. Yeah.
Exactly. And another thing is telepathically. When we get these messages intuitively and in our mind, and we don't know where these thoughts come from, that is another way that our loved ones communicate with us. One story that I love to talk about all the time, there was this girl named Angel that I talk about in my book, Visits from Heaven. And one day I was in my room folding laundry, and all of a sudden I heard this voice in my head say, call my mom. It was so clear. Just call my mom. And intuitively, I knew it was this girl, Angel. How, I don't know, but intuitively, I knew it was this girl, Angel. So I went to go get my folder with all my contact information, and I found her mother's phone number. And, I was a little nervous because, how do I explain this to her mother? But, I've learned through my research to trust my intuition, to trust that inner voice, which is hard to do sometimes. But I got the woman's phone number, called her up. I told her what happened. And you know what she said to me? She said to me, "Oh, my God, Josie, today is my birthday."
Oh.
So I said to her, "Oh, well, happy birthday from your daughter." Now, had I not listened to that voice, had I not made that phone call, I wouldn't have been able to do that for that woman. So, but it's hard though. It's very hard to listen to the signs. And the other thing that people don't realize is physical signs. Pennies, when they communicate with coins, a lot of times if you look at a coin, you will see the year of their birth or the year of their death. So, pennies or any kind of coin, animals, butterflies, dragonflies, smell, like you might walk into the room and you might smell your father's cologne, a specific cologne that he wore, or, your mother's perfume or whatever it may be, or say your my brother-in-law, for instance, I told you he died of lung cancer, and I often smell cigarettes. And when I smell cigarettes, I know it's him. The other thing is a touch and sensation. When you're walking down the street and you get that feeling that somebody's behind you, well, it's the same thing. We sense a presence, but sometimes, sometimes we feel it, or synchronicity, or what I call God incidences, or third-party signs. That's another thing. Third-party signs is the example I gave before. My husband's friend, Rich, came to me with a message for his wife. So I was a third party.
That is a third party. Hey, Josie, I hate to cut you off, but we have like 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Can you tell our listeners how to get a hold of you if they need to find you, or where to find your books?
Sure. The easiest way to reach me is to go onto my website, which is www.josievarga, Josie, Varga, VARGA.com. And they can also find me on Twitter or Facebook. You can put in a call from heaven, or, visits from heaven, the title of my books, and it'll come up. And,
awesome.
My email is there too, so they can email me with any questions, and
okay.
I do my best to get back to everybody.
That's great. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, guys. My pleasure.
Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Good night, Josie.
Well, guys, that wraps up another Supernatural Substation. If you need to find me, I'm on Facebook under Bernadine LeBlanc, and also my website, lspr-society.com. If you're looking for Eileen and her books, she is also on Facebook, and her website is eileenpistanio.net. And you can find us both and our shows on Facebook and YouTube, the Supernatural Substation. Pete, how can we find you?
You can get a hold of me through redoak.com or lsspi.org.
Awesome. Well, this has been another Supernatural Substation. Stay tuned for Kathy Bilski with Quantum Leap. We are on SoundCloud, Spreaker, the radio station South. You can listen to us on the main site, UPRN. Also, we are an iHeart Radio partner. Say goodnight, Pete.
Good night. Thank you all for coming and seeing us and listening to us.
Good night.
Some choices are hard, like should you choose McDonald's Buttermilk Crispy Tenders or the Buttermilk Crispy Chicken in our signature crafted recipe sandwiches? Well, guess what? You can't make a wrong choice. It's Buttermilk Love, and that's good news. Speaking of good news, now you can get McDonald's 2-piece Buttermilk Crispy Tenders for just $2 from their $1, $2, $3 menu. Cannot be combined with other offer or combo meal. Prices and participation may vary.